Samantha Harris was a 35-year-old single mother, navigating the relentless pace of life in New York City. She balanced long hours as an administrative assistant with the exhausting, rewarding chaos of raising two young children. There was never a dull moment. Every day felt like a whirlwind. Work, school pickups, grocery shopping, laundry. Her life was a delicate dance between juggling priorities and making sure everything stayed afloat. On this particular afternoon, she found herself struggling to get everything done before the kids needed to be picked up. After a long day at the office, she stopped at the local grocery store to grab a few essentials. The parking lot was packed, and she was already feeling the stress of trying to fit everything into her limited time. As she struggled with a heavy bag of groceries, she noticed a scene unfolding near the back of the parking lot. A man was surrounded by three aggressive-looking men. They were shouting at him, and one of them grabbed him by the collar, clearly threatening him. Samantha's first instinct was to mind her business, but something about the situation gnawed at her. She couldn't stand by and watch this happen, especially with no one else around. Without thinking, she picked up a bag of canned goods and threw it in the direction of the group, hoping to distract them. The can hit one of the men square in the chest, and for a split second they all turned in shock. The man they were harassing, Ethan Montgomery, used that moment to push the aggressors off him and break free. He looked around for a way out, and his eyes locked with Samantha's. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse but grateful. Samantha stood frozen for a moment, realizing what she'd just done. She had intervened in a dangerous situation without thinking of the consequences. I didn't know what else to do," she replied, her heart racing. Ethan took a few steps toward her, his face still pale from the confrontation. "You saved me," he said, now with more clarity in his voice. "I don't know how to repay you, but I'm Ethan Montgomery. If you ever need anything, please, don't hesitate to ask." He pulled a business card from his pocket and handed it to her. Samantha hesitated, taking it from him slowly. "You really don't have to—" But Ethan cut her off with a soft smile. "I insist. Let me know if you ever need anything. Anything at all." Samantha stood there for a moment, stunned. She wasn't sure what to make of this man or his offer. But in that moment, she couldn't help but feel a small spark of something. Something that she hadn't felt in a long time. Something like hope. As Ethan turned to walk away, she glanced at the card in her hand. Montgomery Enterprises, the card read. It was a name she had heard before, associated with wealth and power, a business empire. Why would someone like him even care about helping someone like her? The thought lingered in her mind as she got into her car, the weight of the bag of groceries still in her hands. She tucked the card into her wallet, unsure if she'd ever reach out. But something about this man, and the way he looked at her with a mix of gratitude and something else, made her think that maybe, just maybe, her life was about to change in ways she couldn't predict. The next morning, Samantha couldn't shake the feeling of the previous day. Ethan Montgomery. She'd never imagined that a brief encounter in a parking lot would lead her to such a strange crossroads. He had seemed sincere, but there was still something about him, something in his eyes that made her hesitate. Her life was already filled with chaos. She had more than enough to handle. Her two kids, an ex-husband who didn't always make things easier, and a job that barely paid the bills. Still, when she woke up that morning and checked her phone, she found an email from Ethan. It was short, direct, and to the point. "I hope you're doing well. I wanted to follow up on our conversation yesterday. If you're open to it, I'd love to discuss an opportunity at Montgomery Enterprises. I think you'd be a great fit. Let me know if you're interested." Samantha stared at the email for several minutes. It wasn't just a polite thank you note. He was offering her a job, and not just any job, an opportunity at a major company. She could hardly believe it. It felt too good to be true. She had worked hard for everything she had, but opportunities like this didn't just fall into your lap. She had always been fiercely independent, never one to rely on anyone for help. But this wasn't just a favor from a stranger. This was a chance to change her circumstances, to create a better life for herself and her children. After several minutes of weighing her options, Samantha took a deep breath, then typed a quick reply. "Thank you for the offer, Ethan. I'd be open to discussing it further. When would be a good time for us to meet?" The reply came almost immediately. "How about tomorrow at 10 a.m.? I can have my assistant set everything up. Looking forward to meeting you in person." Samantha sat back in her chair, the weight of the decision settling in. What had she just agreed to? But she couldn't deny it. She was intrigued. And for once, she wasn't going to let fear stop her from seizing an opportunity. The next day, she found herself in Ethan's sleek office building. The lobby was filled with polished marble floors and the faint scent of expensive cologne. The moment she stepped out of the elevator, the gravity of the situation hit her. She was in a world far removed from her own. "Ms. Harris," The assistant greeted her, smiling warmly. "Mr. Montgomery is expecting you." As they walked through the corridors, Samantha couldn't help but feel a little out of place. This was a world of suits, power lunches, and networking events. She was just a single mom from the other side of the city, trying to make ends meet. When they reached the office, the assistant knocked lightly before opening the door. Ethan stood up immediately from behind his desk, offering a warm, genuine smile. "Samantha, it's good to finally meet you in person." "Thank you for having me," Samantha replied, trying to mask the nervousness she felt. Ethan motioned for her to sit across from him. As she did, she noticed the sleekness of his office, glass walls that offered a stunning view of the city, modern art hanging on the walls, and a large desk that seemed to symbolize his commanding presence. He wasted no time getting to the point. "I'll be honest, I don't usually extend opportunities like this to people I don't know, but something about our interaction yesterday, I believe you have potential. I'd like to offer you a position here at Montgomery Enterprises." Samantha blinked. This was happening fast. "What kind of position?" Ethan smiled. "I need someone who can handle a variety of tasks, administrative work, project management, and overseeing a small team. It's a flexible role, and I believe you could thrive here." Samantha felt a twinge of doubt. This was a big leap, but the idea of financial stability, of being able to provide a better future for her kids, was too tempting to ignore. "I'd like to think it over," she said cautiously. "It's a big decision." "I understand," Ethan replied. "Take all the time you need, but know this, Samantha. You've already shown me that you're capable of handling pressure. I think you could be a great fit for this team." Samantha nodded, unsure of what to say. There was a part of her that wanted to jump at the chance, but she needed time. She had been burned before by impulsive decisions. Still, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of trust in him, something she hadn't felt in a long time. As she left the office, she felt a mix of excitement and uncertainty swirling inside her. She had just stepped into a world she had never imagined for herself. And it was all because of Ethan Montgomery. The days after her meeting with Ethan Montgomery were filled with uncertainty, but also a growing sense of possibility. Samantha couldn't stop thinking about the offer. It seemed like the kind of opportunity she'd been waiting for her whole life, an escape from the daily grind of barely making ends meet. But there was still a part of her that hesitated, a part that told her not to rush into something she didn't fully understand. The following week, Ethan sent her a text asking if she was ready to move forward. His tone was calm, professional, but there was an underlying sense of expectation. She knew he was eager, but that didn't make the decision any easier. She had 2 kids to take care of, and this job would require a level of commitment she wasn't sure she was ready to give. Still, the promise of financial security was something she couldn't ignore. Samantha spent the next few days thinking about it, trying to balance her responsibilities and the life she had created for her children. One evening, as she sat in her living room after putting her kids to bed, she absent-mindedly reached for the old ring her mother had left her before she passed away. It was a simple silver band, nothing extravagant, but it had always held sentimental value. It was her mother's last gift to her, and she had worn it every day since. That night, after receiving a few more messages from Ethan, Samantha couldn't ignore the strange pull she felt towards him. There was something about him, something that felt familiar, though she couldn't place it. As she looked down at the ring, she realized it wasn't just his business offer she found appealing, it was the idea of someone seeing her as more than just a single mother struggling to make ends meet. She felt as if she could finally be seen. The next morning, she woke up early and made the decision. She would accept the offer. But as she prepared to send her reply, she couldn't help but notice that the ring, which had always been a comforting symbol of her late mother, now seemed like it was pulling her towards something she couldn't fully understand. Later that day, she met Ethan again, this time in a coffee shop near her apartment. He had been expecting her message and greeted her with a warm smile when she arrived. "I'm glad you decided to take the opportunity, Samantha," he said, his voice steady, but with a hint of relief. "I knew you'd be a perfect fit." As they talked about the logistics of the job and what her role would involve, Samantha found herself lost in the conversation. Ethan was professional, yet there was a certain ease about him. She couldn't deny the chemistry between them, and despite her hesitation, she felt a strange connection she couldn't explain. At one point during their conversation, as she adjusted her coffee cup, Ethan's eyes caught the ring on her finger. His expression changed subtly, his brow furrowing slightly, though it was only for a second. "Is that, your mother's?" he asked, his voice suddenly quiet. Samantha looked down at the ring, surprised by his question. "Yes, it was the last thing she gave me before she passed away." Ethan's gaze softened, and for a brief moment she saw a flicker of something. Recognition. Pain. in his eyes, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. He cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "It's beautiful. You must have a lot of memories attached to it." "I do," she said, unsure of why his comment made her feel uneasy. "That's a constant reminder of who I am, of where I came from." Ethan nodded, but there was something in his demeanor that felt off. He quickly changed the subject, and Samantha let it slide. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that the ring had triggered something in him, something he wasn't ready to reveal. That evening, after leaving the coffee shop, Samantha couldn't stop thinking about Ethan's reaction. She hadn't expected him to ask about the ring, let alone respond with such intensity. It made her wonder what he was hiding. What was it about this man that made her so unsettled, yet so drawn to him? Later that night, as she sat on the couch, she reached for her phone and scrolled through Ethan's contact information. She had been thinking about calling him, about asking him what was going on behind that guarded expression of his. But before she could type out a message, her phone buzzed. It was a text from him. "I'm sorry about earlier. I didn't mean to make things awkward. I just wanted to say thank you again for everything you've done. You've got more strength than you realize." Samantha stared at the text for a moment, considering how to respond. She didn't want to seem too eager, but something about his words made her want to reach out. "No problem. Just part of the job, right?" She sent the message, then put the phone down, trying to push away the swirling thoughts about Ethan Montgomery and his strange reaction to her mother's ring. The days after the coffee shop meeting with Ethan felt strangely heavy for Samantha. She had accepted the job at Montgomery Enterprises, but something inside her, something she couldn't quite place, made her hesitate. The ring on her finger, once a comfort, now felt like an anchor, a tether to a past she hadn't fully understood. Ethan's reaction to it still haunted her, his brief moment of recognition stirring something deep inside her. What was it about that ring that seemed to affect him so strongly? Work at Montgomery Enterprises started the following week, and Samantha threw herself into it with a mix of excitement and nervousness. The office was luxurious, the staff efficient and professional. It was a far cry from the small, cramped spaces she was used to, but it felt like a breath of fresh air. Ethan was busy, often traveling for work, but he had made it clear that he would check in on her regularly. And so, Samantha found herself adjusting to a new rhythm. The work was challenging, but she found satisfaction in it. Slowly, she began to rebuild the pieces of her life she had lost over the years, finding herself absorbed in the projects she was assigned. Ethan was as enigmatic as ever, always polite, always professional, but there was something about him that pulled at her. They would cross paths in the hallway, exchanging pleasantries, but the tension between them had grown. Samantha was keenly aware of it now, the way their gazes met, held for a second too long before quickly looking away. She couldn't help but wonder if Ethan was as confused by it as she was. It was during a routine meeting about a new project that the tension between them finally reached its peak. Samantha was presenting a detailed report on a potential business venture, her voice steady and confident, when she noticed Ethan's gaze on her. It was intense, but not in a way that made her uncomfortable. Instead, it was almost as if he was searching for something in her. She cleared her throat, trying to ignore the fluttering sensation in her chest, and continued with the presentation. As the meeting came to an end, Ethan excused the others and motioned for Samantha to stay behind. She stood there for a moment, wondering if she had made a mistake or if she had missed something in her presentation. "Samantha, I've been thinking about something," Ethan said, his voice quieter than usual. "About the project?" she asked, still unsure where this was going. "No," he replied, shaking his head slightly. "About you. About the ring." Her heart skipped a beat, and she froze for a second. "What about it?" she asked cautiously. "I don't want to make you uncomfortable, but I have to ask. Did your mother ever mention her past? Her relationship with my father?" Ethan's voice was barely a whisper, but it was enough to send a jolt of panic through Samantha. She stared at him, unsure how to respond. I don't know what you mean." "My mom never talked much about her past. She always kept that part of her life a secret." Ethan took a step closer, his eyes not leaving hers. "Samantha, I think we need to talk about this. There's something you don't know. Something about your mother and my father that you might not understand." Her heart raced. The words didn't make sense. What could he possibly be implying? "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "What are you saying, Ethan?" Ethan's expression softened, but there was a clear pain in his eyes. "There's a reason you and I are connected. A reason your mother never spoke about it. But it's time you knew the truth." Samantha could barely process the words he was saying. She opened her mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Her mind was racing, trying to make sense of the impossible idea he was planting in her mind. "We'll talk soon, Samantha," Ethan said quietly, turning and walking toward the door. She stood frozen, her pulse pounding in her ears. What did he mean by that? What was the truth he was talking about? Samantha spent the next few hours in a daze, unable to concentrate on work. She kept replaying Ethan's words in her mind, trying to piece together the mystery he had dropped into her lap. Her mother had kept so many secrets, but this, whatever it was, had clearly been the one secret that mattered most. That night, after putting her kids to bed, she sat in the quiet of her living room, staring at the old ring on her finger. Her mind raced. If Ethan's father was somehow involved in this, it meant her mother had been hiding a much bigger truth. And the truth was, the one thing Samantha had spent her life avoiding. Samantha couldn't sleep that night. She kept replaying Ethan's words over and over in her mind. There's a reason you and I are connected, a reason your mother never spoke about it. The mystery was eating at her. What could he possibly mean? What was the truth that her mother had hidden for so long? The next morning she couldn't shake the feeling of being on the edge of something she wasn't ready to face. As she prepared breakfast for her kids, the weight of Ethan's revelation hung heavily over her. She couldn't concentrate, couldn't stop thinking about the possibility that the man she had started to trust, Ethan, might be more intimately connected to her life than she ever could have imagined. She tried to push the thoughts aside as she took her kids to school, but they refused to leave her mind. All day she couldn't focus on anything. Work seemed trivial compared to the emotional storm brewing inside her. By the time she left the office in the late afternoon, her thoughts were consumed by one question. What did my mother keep from me? That evening, after tucking her children into bed, she decided she couldn't wait any longer. She needed answers. Samantha reached for her phone and dialed Ethan's number. Her hands trembled slightly, but she quickly steadied herself. After a few rings, he picked up. Samantha. Ethan's voice was low and hesitant, as if he knew why she was calling. I need to know what you were talking about earlier, she said. Her voice steady despite the storm inside her. About my mom and your father. What is this secret? What did she hide from me? There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Ethan finally spoke. We need to meet in person, he said, his voice serious. This isn't something that can be explained over the phone. Samantha felt a pang of anxiety. She wanted answers, but part of her feared what she would find. Was this really the right decision? Where? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. There's a cafe on 52nd Street. I'll be there in an hour. Samantha agreed to the meeting, her heart pounding in her chest. What could Ethan possibly say that would explain everything? What truth could change everything she thought she knew about her family? When Samantha arrived at the cafe, she spotted Ethan immediately. He was sitting in a corner booth, his expression unreadable. As she approached, his gaze met hers, and there was something in his eyes, something that made her stomach tighten. She wasn't sure if it was guilt, sadness, or something else entirely. Thanks for coming, Ethan said as she sat down across from him. He didn't waste time. Samantha, I know this is going to be hard to hear, but the truth is, your mother and my father had a brief relationship years ago. Samantha felt as though the air had been knocked out of her. The words hung in the air like a weight that she couldn't escape. She tried to speak, but her mouth was dry. They were young, Ethan continued, and your mother was in love with him. But after a short time, things got complicated. Your mother became pregnant with you, but she kept it a secret. My father didn't know about you, and your mother never told him. She wanted to protect you from him, from the mess that his life had become. Samantha's heart raced. Her mother had kept something this huge from her. Why? How had she never known this? Why didn't she tell me? Samantha finally managed to ask. Her voice cracked, betraying the hurt she felt. Ethan's face softened. Your mother was afraid. She didn't want you to be dragged into the complications of my father's world. He wasn't the man you might think he was, and she wanted to protect you from that life. But she also didn't want you to grow up knowing the truth because, honestly, it would have destroyed everything. She loved you too much to burden you with that knowledge. Tears welled up in Samantha's eyes as everything began to unravel. She had never known her mother's past, and now it felt like her entire life was built on a foundation of lies and omissions. But why now? Samantha whispered, her voice shaking. Why tell me now? Ethan sighed deeply. Because I think you deserve to know the truth. I think we both deserve to understand the past, to understand how we are connected, and maybe we can finally begin to heal. Samantha stared at him, her mind racing. She didn't know what to think, what to feel. Her mother had shielded her from this information, but now Ethan had brought it to light in a way she hadn't expected. I don't know what to do with this, she said softly. Everything I thought I knew about my family, about my life, it's all changed. Ethan leaned forward slightly. I understand that, and I'm not asking you to jump into anything with me, but I think we should find out where this connection leads, for both of us. Samantha swallowed hard. She had no idea what was ahead, but in that moment she realized something. The truth was painful, but it was the first step to understanding her past, and maybe even understanding her future. "Okay," she said quietly, looking at Ethan. "Let's figure this out. Together." Samantha's world felt as if it had been ripped apart and reassembled in a way she couldn't comprehend. The weight of Ethan's words lingered in her mind. The idea that her mother had hidden this monumental truth about her past, that she and Ethan were connected in ways neither of them had known, was hard to accept. How had she never suspected? How had her mother kept something so important from her all these years? But as much as she wanted to push the knowledge away, it wouldn't let her. The truth was now out there, and with it came questions she could no longer ignore. Over the next few days, Samantha threw herself into her work, hoping to distract herself from the confusion swirling in her mind. But the strain was evident in everything she did. Every time she looked at Ethan, every time they exchanged words, it was like something was hanging between them, something they couldn't talk about, but couldn't avoid either. As the days passed, Samantha found herself walking a fine line between confronting the past and keeping it buried. But Ethan had made it clear. This connection was real, and they needed to figure out what it meant. That afternoon, after another long day at work, she found herself standing at the edge of a decision. She was at home, sitting at her kitchen table, the kids asleep in their rooms, when her phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. "We need to talk." Her heart skipped a beat, the familiar tension settling in her chest. She knew they had to talk. She knew they had to face whatever this connection between them meant. But the question was, what now? She stared at the phone, then set it down and rubbed her temples. She was exhausted, both physically and emotionally. The weight of the truth was too much, and yet she couldn't run from it. As the evening stretched on, her thoughts kept drifting back to the days when she was a child, to her mother's secrets, to the unspoken things that had been buried deep in their home. Her mother had always been protective, always kept a part of herself hidden from Samantha. Now Samantha understood why, but she also felt betrayed, as if her mother had kept her in the dark for a reason that only served to protect herself, not Samantha. The ringing of the phone broke her thoughts. It was Ethan. "Hey," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "Hey, Samantha," Ethan replied, his voice softer than usual. "Are you free to talk?" "I'm always free," she answered, even though she wasn't sure if that was the truth. "What's up?" "I know this is complicated. I know this isn't easy," Ethan began, "but I think it's time we had a real conversation about all of this." Samantha's pulse quickened. "What do you mean?" "I mean about the past, about our parents, about us." He hesitated. "I don't want to pressure you, but we need to figure this out. We can't keep avoiding it." She felt the weight of his words sink in. She didn't know what was scarier, the truth about her mother or the possibility of what Ethan was suggesting, that they might actually be family, that whatever they had begun between them could never be. "I don't know how to handle this, Ethan," she said softly, the vulnerability in her voice unmistakable. "I don't know how to deal with everything you've told me, but I do know that I can't keep pretending like I don't feel something between us." Ethan was silent for a moment. "I get it. This isn't easy for either of us, but we have to face it, Samantha. We have to figure out where we go from here." Samantha took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I don't know what the answer is, but I'm willing to try, if you are." Ethan's voice softened. "I'm willing. I don't want to run from this anymore. Let's figure it out, together." The next few days were filled with small, tentative steps forward. Ethan and Samantha agreed to meet again, this time with a clear intention to talk openly about their past, their families, and what it meant for them moving forward. As they sat in the quiet corner of a cafe, Samantha could feel the tension in the air between them, but it was different this time. It wasn't just the anxiety of the unknown. It was the realization that they were standing on the edge of something neither of them had ever anticipated. Ethan was the first to break the silence. "Samantha, I want to be honest with you. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I know it's a lot for both of us, but there's one thing I need to say. No matter what this turns into, I care about you, and I don't want you to feel like you're alone in this." Samantha looked at him, the sincerity in his eyes undeniable. "I don't feel alone, Ethan, but it's hard to process everything all at once. I can't just switch my feelings off, and I don't know what this means for us. For me, I understand," he said quietly. "We don't have to have all the answers right now, but I think we can figure it out, step by step." Samantha nodded, her heart pounding. She wasn't ready for the answers yet, but she knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, she wouldn't face it alone. Samantha woke up the next morning with a heavy heart. It had been a week since she and Ethan had agreed to take the first step toward understanding the truth about their past, but it felt like an eternity. Despite the clarity she had after their last conversation, there was a part of her that couldn't shake the dread of the unknown. Every time she thought about the deepening connection with Ethan, she couldn't help but feel torn between the past and the future, between what she knew and what she was starting to feel. Her mind kept returning to the one question that had been haunting her. What does this all mean for my family? She couldn't afford to ignore the risks of this newfound connection. Her children needed her. Her life, as complicated as it was, had a certain rhythm, a routine that made sense. The thought of disrupting it all, of allowing herself to fall further into whatever was brewing between her and Ethan, scared her more than she could admit. Her heart told her to move forward. Her mind, however, screamed for caution. But as the days passed, things started to feel even more out of her control. Work at Montgomery Enterprises was becoming increasingly demanding, and the boundaries between her personal life and professional life were starting to blur. She found herself thinking about Ethan during meetings, distracted by his touch when he'd lightly rest his hand on her shoulder or glance at her with those eyes that seemed to hold unspoken words. She couldn't deny the attraction, but she also couldn't ignore the looming fear of the complications they both carried. The pressure was building. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, Samantha came home to find her ex-husband, David, waiting at her door. The tension between them had always been palpable, but tonight it was heavier than usual. "David, what are you doing here?" Samantha asked, already feeling her patience thin. She had enough on her plate without dealing with him. David didn't waste time with pleasantries. "I need to talk about the kids. I've been thinking a lot about the custody arrangement and I want to revisit it. This back and forth isn't working." Samantha felt a pit form in her stomach. She had been through this before. David was always trying to control everything, always using their children as leverage in his power games. "I've already told you, David," she said, her voice tight. "The arrangement is what it is. You get your visitation. I get the kids the rest of the time. You can't keep dragging them into this." David's eyes darkened. "You don't get it, do you? You're not the stable one anymore, Sam. You've been distracted, and I'm worried about the kids seeing you like this, seeing you—" He gestured vaguely, his voice cold. "Going through your own issues, focusing on work, on whatever it is you're focused on. They need consistency." The words hit her like a slap. Her heart pounded as she fought to maintain composure. "Don't question my ability to care for my children," Samantha snapped. "You don't get to use them as an excuse to control me. If you want full custody, you'll have to fight me in court. But I won't let you take them from me, David. Not now, not ever." David's expression faltered, but only for a moment. "I'm doing what's best for them, Sam. You're not seeing the full picture." He turned and walked out of her apartment, leaving her breathless with anger and frustration. Once the door slammed behind him, Samantha stood frozen, her mind spinning. Later that evening, as she sat in the quiet of her living room, the phone buzzed again. This time it was a message from Ethan. It was simple, just a few words, but it made her heart skip. "We need to talk. Can I come by?" She stared at the message for a long time, unsure of how to respond. The last thing she needed was to dive deeper into whatever this was between them, but something inside her urged her to meet him. They had only begun to scratch the surface of what lay between them, what they could be. But with the pressure of the custody battle hanging over her, the truth of her own tangled emotions, and the sudden distance growing between her and Ethan, she wasn't sure if she could handle it all. She hesitated, then typed back, "Come by in an hour." When Ethan arrived, he seemed different. The usual easygoing energy he carried was replaced with a tension that matched her own. He sat down on the couch across from her, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was deafening. "Ethan," Samantha finally said, breaking the quiet, "I don't know what this is between us anymore. I don't know if I can keep doing this." Ethan met her eyes, his expression a mix of concern and something deeper. "I didn't mean for things to get complicated," he said softly, "but I don't want you to push me away because of your fear. I care about you, Samantha, and I think there's something real here, something we can't ignore." Samantha's heart raced. She wasn't ready for this conversation, but she also couldn't deny the feelings that had been building. The attraction, the connection, the history. It all felt too much. "I'm not sure I can handle this," she said, her voice cracking. "Between work, the kids, and everything with David, I can't afford to lose focus. I don't know if I can let myself fall into something that could fall apart." Ethan leaned forward slightly, his voice tender. "Samantha, I'm not asking you to lose control of your life. I'm asking you to give this a chance, to see where it can go. You're not alone in this." Her breath caught in her throat. For a moment she let herself imagine the possibility of them, what it could be like to let go of the past, to trust in something real, something that could grow. But the fear of losing herself, the fear of allowing someone else to have that much control over her emotions, still lingered. "I need time, Ethan," she whispered. "I need to figure out who I am before I can let anyone in." Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "I understand, but don't shut me out. Whatever happens, I'm here for you. I want to help you through this, Samantha." She swallowed the lump in her throat. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance for something good. But the walls inside her were still high, and the cracks were just beginning to show. The following week felt like a blur. Samantha continued to throw herself into her work, distracting herself from the complicated emotions that continued to rise with every passing day. There was something comforting about the rhythm of her job. The reports, the meetings, the small victories, these things gave her a sense of control when everything else felt so uncertain. But every night, after her kids were tucked into bed, the weight of her decisions would catch up to her. Ethan's words, his plea for her to trust him, kept echoing in her mind. He had been patient with her, understanding of her struggles, but she wasn't sure how long that patience could last. On top of that, David's continued threats about the custody battle had left her feeling on edge. The uncertainty about her future with her kids hung over her like a storm cloud, making everything else feel insignificant. Ethan, for all his sincerity, was another complication in her already messy life. She knew that she couldn't keep putting off what she needed to confront. She needed answers, and she needed clarity, both about her feelings for Ethan and what this connection with him truly meant. It wasn't just about the business offer or his charm. It was about something deeper, something more personal that she couldn't quite define. That evening, as she prepared dinner for her kids, Samantha received a call. She didn't recognize the number, but something inside her told her to pick it up. "Hello?" she answered, her voice tight. "Samantha, it's me, Ethan," came the voice on the other end. There was an urgency to his tone that made her stop mid-motion. "We need to talk in person. Now." Her stomach dropped. "What's wrong?" "I'll explain when you see me, please," Ethan urged. "This is important." An hour later, Samantha found herself sitting across from Ethan in a quiet cafe, trying to ignore the nervous energy that buzzed between them. The night was cold, and she could feel the tension in the air. Ethan didn't waste time. He leaned forward, his face serious. "Something's happening, Samantha," he began. "Something I didn't want to tell you, but I have to. I've been trying to protect you, to keep you out of it. But it's getting to a point where I can't anymore." Samantha's heart raced. "What are you talking about?" Ethan's voice dropped to a whisper. "Your mother and my father, their relationship wasn't just a brief affair. It wasn't a simple past. It was complicated. And now I'm afraid that whatever my father's involvement in this, whatever secrets he's been hiding, it's coming back to haunt us both." Samantha stared at him, confused and overwhelmed. "What do you mean? I don't understand. What secrets?" Ethan looked around, making sure no one was listening before he continued. "My father is involved in some shady business dealings, and your mother knew about it. I think she tried to protect you from all of it. But now, with him getting older and his past catching up to him, I'm afraid it might drag both of us into something we can't get out of." Samantha's pulse quickened. "Are you saying my mother knew about this and didn't tell me?" Ethan nodded gravely. "She wanted to keep you safe, Samantha. She thought she was protecting you by keeping you in the dark. But now that everything is starting to unravel, I don't know how much longer we can stay out of it." Samantha took a deep breath, trying to absorb what he was saying. This was too much. Too many revelations. Too much information. She felt the walls inside her cracking, her carefully constructed life starting to crumble around her. "So what do we do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "What am I supposed to do with this information?" Ethan's gaze softened. "I wish I had all the answers. I really do. But I think the first step is figuring out what role my father played in all of this and how it connects to your mother. If we can understand that, maybe we can stop it from affecting your future and ours." Samantha sat back in her chair, the weight of his words pressing down on her. Everything she thought she knew about her mother, about her past, was suddenly in question. What was the truth? And why had her mother kept it from her? For the first time in a long time, Samantha felt completely lost. There was no clear path forward, no easy solution. She wasn't sure if she could handle it, but she also knew that the truth, no matter how painful, was the only way to move forward. "I don't know if I can do this, Ethan," she said quietly. "I don't know if I'm ready to face everything my mother hid from me." Ethan's expression softened. "You don't have to do it alone. Samantha, I'm here. We'll figure this out together, whatever it takes." Samantha took a deep breath, looking at him with uncertainty. She had no idea what the future held, but for the first time, She allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a chance to rebuild her life and to understand the truth behind the years of secrets. The next few days passed in a blur for Samantha. Each time she tried to return to her normal routine, the weight of what Ethan had told her dragged her back to the harsh reality. The connection between her mother and Ethan's father was not just some distant past. Something about it was far deeper and more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Her mother's secret life, the involvement with Ethan's father, it was all a web of deceit and lies that had been carefully spun to protect her. But now those lies were coming to light, and Samantha was faced with a truth she wasn't sure how to handle. Every time she saw Ethan at work, their conversations felt different. The tension between them was palpable, and she couldn't ignore the complex mix of emotions, curiosity, fear, and attraction that pulsed between them. They hadn't discussed the full extent of what his father's secrets might mean for both of them, but Samantha knew that whatever it was bigger than either of them had anticipated. At night, when her children were asleep, Samantha would sit alone in her living room trying to make sense of everything. She thought about her mother, her quiet strength, the way she had always shielded Samantha from the darker parts of her past. But now, with her mother gone and the truth coming to light, Samantha felt as if she were unraveling a part of herself she didn't even know existed. She hadn't realized how much she had relied on the image of her mother as a rock, strong, loving, untouchable, until that image began to crack. Her mother wasn't just the person who had raised her, she was someone who had lived a life Samantha could barely recognize. And now, that life was catching up to her, forcing Samantha to question everything she thought she knew. But despite the overwhelming nature of the situation, one thing was clear. She couldn't ignore the connection between her and Ethan any longer. It wasn't just about the business offer anymore, or even the complicated nature of their relationship. It was about the truth that tied them together, no matter how painful or inconvenient it might be. It was a Friday when Samantha finally decided she couldn't take the uncertainty any longer. She had to confront Ethan, to have the full conversation they'd been avoiding. She couldn't go on in this emotional limbo any longer, caught between fear and curiosity, between the past and what they might become. She messaged him that afternoon. "I think we need to talk, for real." "Tonight?" Ethan responded almost immediately. "I agree. I'll meet you at the cafe in an hour." As Samantha made her way to the cafe, she felt the knot in her stomach tightening. This conversation could change everything, but at the same time she felt like it was the only way forward. She had no more space in her life for half-truths and secrets. Not from Ethan, not from anyone. When she arrived, Ethan was already there, waiting for her. He was seated at a corner table, looking as conflicted as she felt. His eyes softened when he saw her, but there was an edge to his expression that told her he was just as unsure as she was about what they were about to discuss. Samantha sat down across from him, her heart pounding in her chest. "You wanted to talk," Ethan began quietly. "So let's talk." Samantha took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about my mother, about her connection to your father." Ethan nodded, his gaze never leaving hers. "I know this is a lot. I know you're probably feeling like everything you've known is falling apart. But Samantha, there's no easy way to tell you this, but I think we're at a crossroads. We have to decide if we're going to face this together or if we're going to let the past keep us apart." Samantha swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "I don't know if I'm ready for this, Ethan. I don't know if I can face the truth about my mother. It's too much. It's all too much." Ethan leaned forward, his expression softening. "I know it's hard, but I'm not asking you to go through this alone. I'm here, Samantha. I'm not going anywhere." For a moment, Samantha closed her eyes, letting the words sink in. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if she could handle all the complexities that came with this revelation, but Ethan's words, his unwavering support, were something she hadn't expected. And for the first time in a long time, she realized she didn't have to face everything alone. "I don't know what I'm doing, Ethan," she said quietly, her voice cracking. "I don't know where this is going." Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand gently in his. "Neither do I, but I do know this. We don't have to have all the answers right now. We can take it one step at a time, together." Samantha looked at their hands, the simple gesture of comfort hitting her harder than she expected. There was no turning back now. Whatever the truth was, whatever secrets lay hidden in their family's pasts, they were bound to it. But for the first time, Samantha allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, they could find a way forward. Samantha's life had been turned upside down. In the span of just a few weeks, everything she thought she knew about her past, her family and her future had been shattered. But with Ethan by her side, she began to piece together the fragments of her life. They had started this journey together, strangers bound by a shared secret. And now, Samantha knew it was time to face the full truth, no matter how painful or complicated it might be. She had never expected to find herself here, sitting in front of Ethan, contemplating the future with someone who, until recently, had been a distant figure. But now she realized he was part of her future. The connection between them wasn't just about their family's shared history, it was about what they could build together in the present, despite the weight of everything that had come before them. But there was one more thing Samantha needed: closure. She needed to understand the full extent of her mother's choices. She needed to know why her mother had hidden the truth for so long, and what it meant for her own life moving forward. It was Ethan who finally made the call to bring everything to light. He had the final piece of the puzzle, the truth about their parents' complicated relationship and the role it played in shaping everything that had happened since. The two of them drove out to the outskirts of the city, to a small estate that Ethan had arranged to visit. It was his father's property, one that had been kept away from the public eye for years. It wasn't the kind of place Samantha ever imagined she'd set foot in, but here she was, about to confront the last chapter of the story. The house was old, with ivy creeping up its walls. It was beautiful in an eerie way, like a forgotten relic of another time. As they stood in front of the door, Ethan turned to Samantha. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" he asked, his voice gentle but full of concern. Samantha swallowed, her heart pounding in her chest. She wasn't sure, but she knew there was no turning back now. "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. "I need to know the truth. I need to understand." Ethan nodded and opened the door, leading her inside. The house was dimly lit, filled with old furniture and dusty antiques that seemed untouched by time. It felt like they were stepping into a memory, a place frozen in the past. They walked through the hallway, and Ethan stopped in front of a door at the end of the corridor. "This is where it all started," he said quietly. "This is where I found out about you, and where everything started to unravel." Samantha looked at him, the weight of his words sinking in. "What happened in there?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan opened the door, revealing a small study with a large desk cluttered with papers. On the wall, there was a framed photograph, a younger version of Ethan's father, standing next to a woman Samantha didn't recognize. The woman had an unmistakable resemblance to her mother. "This is where I found my father's journals," Ethan explained. "He kept everything, every detail of his life, his mistakes, his secrets. He wrote about your mother, about their brief relationship, and about what happened after she found out she was pregnant with you." Samantha walked over to the desk, her hands shaking as she picked up one of the journals. She flipped it open, reading the neat but cold handwriting of Ethan's father. The words spilled out, describing a love affair that had been full of passion but also betrayal. Ethan's father had promised to be there for her mother, but when she became pregnant, he disappeared, leaving her to deal with the consequences on her own. The words stung. They were nothing like the stories her mother had told her. Her mother had always painted her father as a ghost, a man who never existed in her life. But now, reading these words, Samantha realized that her mother's silence was her way of protecting her from a truth too painful to accept. As she turned the page, she found an entry that made her freeze. "I never told her about the child. I never told her about Samantha. I thought it was better that way. But now, I wonder if I was wrong." Samantha's breath caught in her throat. Her mother had known about Ethan's father. And not only that, she had kept the secret of Samantha's own existence from him. Her mother had chosen to protect her, to keep her safe from the tangled mess of their past, even if it meant keeping her in the dark. Samantha looked up at Ethan, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "She knew," she whispered. "She knew all along, and she never told me." Ethan walked over to her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "She did it to protect you. Your mother loved you, Samantha. She did what she thought was best. But now we're here, and the truth is out. We can't go back, but we can move forward." Samantha wiped away a tear, trying to steady her breathing. The truth was painful, but she knew now that it wasn't just about the past. It was about the future. It was about who she was now and what she wanted to build with the people she cared about. "I don't know what's next," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "but I know I can't let this define me. I have to move on." Ethan smiled softly, his hand still on her shoulder. "We'll figure it out together, Samantha. Whatever happens, you're not alone." For the first time in a long time, Samantha allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could finally move past the secrets and the pain. She didn't have all the answers, but she had a chance to create a new beginning, and with Ethan by her side, she was ready to take that first step.
Hope you enjoyed the story. Comment where you're watching from, leave a like, and subscribe to the channel.